Dr. Wd Gaster, the royal scientist before Alphys, and creator of the core that gives power to the monsters of the underground, as well as discovering the existence of other timelines and the ability of certain people to travel through them. This doctor had 2 other apprentices, Sans and one more, presumably Alphys, but it's unclear. It could very well be Papyrus. According to his followers, Dr. Gaster fell into his creation and was scattered across time and space, forgotten from many people's memories. However, it's hinted through many different meta-clues placed by Toby Fox himself that Gaster is still capable of pulling the strings and guiding the destiny of others. Hopefully to a good place. It isn't clear at all why he continues to do what he does, only that he finds these things interesting. For now, we will place Dr. Wd Gaster and his disciples as true neutral, but this is subject to change. Perhaps for now, we should check in on another timeline.
Oh, how fun!
Not that you really have a choice in where we look. Nobody gets to choose the content that others make.
Greetings friends, my name is Stuart, and welcome to the D&D Alignment Show. This week we're going to take a look at a game called Deltarune. Now to those that don't know, Deltarune is a standalone game currently being created by Toby Fox, and is a very straightforward and linear adventure. We play as a child named Chris, and they live in an average neighborhood filled with various monsters, including differently abled furries, fully abled fish, and dinosaurs as teachers. The gameplay itself consists of an overworld that can be wandered around, but the combat is a turn-based party system, but each ability and attacks are done through either time-based events or special attacks that are executed using TP, which can be built up by dodging attacks with narrow dodges or by guarding. Moving past the tutorial, we are introduced to a rough gal named Susie. Chris is partnered with Susie for a class project, but because the teacher ran out of chalk, they are tasked with going into the back room and getting some more supplies with her. Chris sees her eat some chalk and becomes embarrassed, thinking that we will tell everyone about it. She then threatens to kill them, but changes her mind, saying that she would rather not make their kind mother sad. The two head into the supply closet and then are transported into a world of darkness, where legends that 2 heroes of light will appear and save everyone. I think this gives us a good introduction to both Chris and Susie's character. Chris seems to be a normal child and seemingly the only human in a world of monsters. They are a quiet and gentle soul that wouldn't hurt a fly. However, at the moment, we don't see anything that would suggest that Chris would go out of their way to help anyone either. So, with that, we will label Chris as true neutral. Susie, however, is a bit more of a troublemaker and a bit more of a grizzled loner. It's clear that she has a chip on her shoulder and doesn't really know what to make of herself most of the time, and is clearly just a damaged individual. To me, this is clearly the sign of a chaotic neutral character, and a type of kid I see so often during my day in life as a teacher, and I completely understand what the creator is going for with her. Now that we have our 2 main characters out of the way, we'll be going beat by beat through the game and giving an alignment to each and every single character. I look forward to the challenge, and I hope you guys do too. And away we go! But before we get into our characters, this video is brought to you by our friends over at GUI Cube. Their Kickstarter just launched for their campaign world setting and their adventure boxes for 5th edition. And hear me out now, not only do they offer an incredibly impressive and unique campaign world, but every one of their adventure boxes includes an amazing array of handouts and supporting materials that makes the GM's life way easier. These include an adventure book, GM's guide, 50 to 70 full color 8x10 handouts, they're beautiful by the way, a bunch of NPC portraits, maps, spells, and item cards, and a bunch of other things to make your adventures deeper, more intense, way more immersive, and truly enthralling. Click the link in the description down below and head on over to the Kickstarter page and pledge to see one of the most impressive 5e campaign worlds and multi-chapter adventure campaigns ever made. Also, since their campaign launched yesterday, they were funded in 2 minutes and are just freaking killing it. So if you guys want to back a rising star, now is the time to do it. Click the link below. We will go ahead and begin our story in the Dark World. Our heroes wander for a while before they are attacked by a mysterious foe. They escape and find themselves in front of a castle and are greeted by a mysterious hooded figure known as the Prince of Darkness. He reveals to the party the legend of the Deltarune, and they are the Delta warriors destined to help the Darkners. Susie naturally refuses and leaves, an obvious chaotic neutral act, but before she can, the hooded figure is attacked by the person from earlier, who reveals himself to be a boy named Lancer and declares himself as the bad guy, and he will defeat us. Susie instead attacks him, which begins our first combat. It's at this point that I should probably address that there are actually two different methods of progressing throughout the game that the fans have dubbed the pacifist route and the slaughter route. In the pacifist route, you as Chris perform actions that will, instead of harming enemies, figure out peaceful solutions to their problems, make them run away, or otherwise stop attacking you of their own volition. The slaughter route is the route where you just choose to attack enemies with your full might. As mentioned before, the game is pretty linear, so there's no major differences in these decisions, and the game progresses regardless of what decision you choose. Everyone still goes through the same character arc as normal, but with minor subtle changes. I'll address each change as it comes, but really this gameplay difference is mostly for your own personal benefit as the player. For the sake of this video, we will be progressing through the story assuming that we are playing as a pacifist, but when it comes to the ending, I will address the differences there. At this moment, Susie attacks without hesitation, but in her defense, Lancer already declared his intent to capture Chris. Lancer eventually leaves after so many turns, declaring that his bike is running out of fuel. After he leaves, the hooded figure reveals himself to be the cutest character design ever. Oh my god, Nat 20 design. This is Ralsay, and he's an incredibly sweet boy that will serve as party healer and wizard. He is genuinely a good person, and he says he's been waiting his whole life for Chris and Susie to appear in the Dark World. He teaches us how to fight and informs us and encourages us to find peaceful solutions to every conflict, and how to spare enemies. Ralsay, despite being kind and sweet, does have a sizable bit of sass to him, and will frequently use some kind of word foo to confuse or mess with enemies. It's always playful, but sometimes his patience does slip a little bit. Since this character is always trying his best, is a loyal prince to his kingdom, and frequently puts others before himself, I think Ralsay is a solid, lawful good. However, before he can be properly introduced, Susie leaves on her own in order to get back to the real world. After a fight tutorial, Ralsay and Chris head through the door. Funny enough, there really aren't a lot of different enemy types in Deltarune. In fact, there are only 16 different enemy types in the game, and that's including a fight with Susie, Lancer, 2 bosses, and a secret boss. All of the enemies of the same type all have the same behavior and can be solved in the same manner, so you'll be surprised how few characters and NPCs we will actually have to examine. Once our heroes go into the field of hopes and dreams, they encounter an enemy called Rudin, who can easily be convinced to quit his duties and stop fighting since he hates his boss. I'm just gonna say chaotic neutral on him. We then encounter Topshift, a victim of Susie's rampage. Turns out Susie ate a significant portion of his cake, which is smoking and on fire. Not even gonna pretend to know how that works, but either way, he claims that when she did this, he sprayed her with a water bottle and she ran off. Turns out this guy also becomes a bit of a side quest. If you take a piece of cake and get it reforged and then bring it back, he becomes so grateful that he will forever provide you with lesser cakes until you leave the Dark World. I think I'm gonna call this lawful good as well, since he used non-violent methods to ward off Susie earlier, and he has this weird sense of honor when you help him out. They encounter a new enemy called Hathy after that, an enemy heart that can be spared by flirting with them? Ralsay, that absolute charmer, can sway an entire harem of them. We also learn that they are considered support units. We'll come back to that later, but for now, I'll say that most Hathys are chaotic horny. The duo then head into a new area and discover Susie's on the warpath, defeating every enemy along the way. We encounter one of these defeated soldiers called a Jigsawry. These soldiers are actually incredibly friendly, and one even warns Chris about Susie's attacks. To top it all off, they dislike fighting but only do it in order to make ends meet, because they're puzzles.
We can't keep letting them get away with this.
I'm just gonna give these guys a neutral good because they are more bound by circumstances than honor or anything like that. Chris and Ralsay run into Susie again, who joins the party. Sorta. They have a mini-boss fight, to which Susie scares off with a vicious attack. They then learn pretty quickly that they're going to have to warn others about her violent tendencies. They head into the next area before encountering more NPCs. The next NPC the party encounters is the shop owner, named Sham. This character is actually pretty fascinating and has connections to the secret boss Jevil that we will discover later. There are a small bunch of Jigsaw characters that offer some tutorials, but they are pretty much all less knowledgeable than Ralsay. You can donate money to help them, but it's not advised. After heading east, the party runs into Lancer again, to which Susie is having none of his nonsense and threatens to bite his face off. There's a quick fight that is quickly handled, and they do some puzzles and some minor obstacles before reaching the Great Board. There, the party encounters the Pawn Man. It is said that they have no will of their own and they obey the king without question, but if you spare them a bunch or be nice to them, they'll just stop attacking you. Maybe their morals took over? Lawful neutral leaning towards good, maybe. They run into Lancer again, who has considerably upped his intimidation game. He then asks Susie for critique on his threat and says she was his inspiration for becoming scarier. The four of them have this little bonding moment where they pick a team name. It's cute. In this particular playthrough, they chose the Fun Gang. The Fun Gang then leave and encounter two other individuals. Mr. Elegance, who is based off of a knight on a chessboard, and Mr. Society, who is based on bishops from chess. Mr. Elegance explains the lore of the Pawn Men and explains that they're sort of victims here. And Mr. Clown World tells us that they are intelligent and corroborates the story about the Pawn Men. I'm just gonna give these guys a plain true neutral, although they are nice enough to fix up the fast travel door for you with the puzzle guys. They then encounter C Round again, who then digivolves into K Round with a crown after reaching the end of the Great Board. Nice reference. Lancer implies that these creatures tend to crush people to death, leading me to believe it's chaotic evil. However, it's also implied that these things may not be intelligent or capable of higher thinking, since when you try to warn it about Susie's attacks, it doesn't seem to understand what they're saying, especially considering that Pawn Men may not have intelligence either. This may just be a creature's nature or programming? It's hard to say. It's so dumb that it bows like a Japanese deer when you bow at it, so let's call it somewhere between chaotic evil and true neutral. After the fight, Susie and Ralsay get into an argument and Susie decides to switch sides to Lancer and she says she'll be one of the bad guys. They do lots of diabolical stuff, like call Ralsay Toothpaste Boy and plan sleepovers. Truly chaotic evil stuff. Ralsay heads into the forest and is attacked by a rabbit, a dust bunny-like creature that can be blown away and be spared. It's basically an animal, so neutral. They then encounter several other random NPC in the forest, such as Partycoat Rack and Little Ball. They're neutral and give you a raggy scarf. They also encounter two blue blocks that give them a bracelet. Blocker! I don't know what I'm looking at, but if you arrange it in the correct order, they can be pacified. The party is then attacked by a weird Hydra thing named Clover. Each head has a different personality, and you need to talk to them about what they like before they are pacified. They apparently only talk to you because you didn't say hi to them on their birthday, and I don't know, they just kind of leave. I'll just say chaotic neutral for randomness. The Great Smith Malleus is neutral good. He fixes anything for you. Items, weapons, boss keys, cake. You? Absolutely free of charge. Thank you? The worm is just a worm. True neutral. These creatures are called scissor dancers, and I have no idea what purpose they serve other than the typical RPG Maker style obstacle. I literally have no idea, so they don't seem to actively pursue you, they're just kind of dancing, I guess. So, neutral, I suppose. The Star Walker and Star Walker birds, frankly, I have no idea what they are. I'm just gonna be honest, the birds attack you presumably out of loyalty to the king, and I have no idea what the original guy's about. So throughout the forest, Susie and Lancer have been harassing the good guys and being playfully inept bad guys. It's very clear that they're having way more fun being pranksters and goofballs than actually attacking anyone. It isn't even until the very end of the forest do they even consider using violence. In the end, Ralsay and Chris convince them to rejoin the good guys. I'm just gonna call this more chaotic neutral behavior on their end. Once Susie and Lancer join the party, they start to journey towards the castle and bond over trivial things like food, bad jokes, and just being goofballs. Lancer and Susie both comment on how they're feeling fulfilled and happy. Ralsay insists it's because their purpose of darkness is meant to support lighteners, like Susie and Chris, but Susie rebukes that and puts him at ease. However, Lancer becomes more and more nervous as they continue, beginning to really come to terms with what their quest is going to result in. Susie and Chris need to get to the Darkness Fountain, which is their trip home. The fountain is being guarded, and Lancer is worried about them getting hurt. Susie, thinking she is saying the right things, says they'll just crush whoever's in the way, and Lancer, realizing this, runs off. The party then gives chase. They are captured and thrown into prison. Susie figures out a way and confronts Lancer about it. Lancer confesses to Susie that he was the one to give the order to imprison them. Susie takes this really personally, being very clearly upset and approaches him with a vicious intent. She tells him to move and he refuses. She then attacks him and they fight. In one of the most emotional moments of the game, if Susie takes a lot of damage, Lancer will purposely start missing his attacks and refuse to move despite the fact that she said she will kill him if she has to. She then realizes this. Lancer admits that the reason he had them imprisoned is because his father is guarding the darkness fountain and is very powerful. Since they would have to fight him in order to get home, Lancer does his best to stop you. Lancer doesn't want either party to be hurt. Susie promises not to kill him, to which Lancer eventually finds agreeable. He lets her go and says that he will go talk to the king while Susie goes to free the other two. Down in the prisons, there are a bunch of other prisoners, including the 3 lawful good kings. I call them that because the first thing they request from our heroes is that their subjects be saved. The other 3 prisoners I frankly have no idea about, since they only have 1 line of dialogue each, and yeah. The party leaves and travels through the castle to get to the king. Susie even mentions to the other 2 that she doesn't want to hurt Lancer's dad, and agrees to act peacefully along with the party. Several strange NPC block their path, including the Rudin Rangers, who are just as incompetent as the regular Rudins. Chaotic neutral. Head Hathies, whom I would say are more professional than regular Hathies, but in reality are just as chaotic corny. We also encounter Rules Card, the Duke of Puzzles, who is completely incompetent, making only the most basic of puzzles with barely any elements. He is thwarted easily, like several times easily, before just giving up and starts selling the party equipment. He does sick another K round on the party, but it's not really that important. Chaotic neutral. The party encounters the king and is revealed pretty quickly to be a huge turd. He holds his own son hostage in order to make the heroes kneel before him, and was about to execute them, but would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for Lancer's actions. Chris and the party try their best to reason with the king, but he just won't hear of it. A long battle commences where he admits to serving another character called the Knight, a Darknu who apparently made the second Darkness well. The party realizes that the only option is to fight, which eventually nets them the win. Or does it? Turns out the king was faking his injuries in order to get a heal from Ralsay and double-cross them. He's about to execute Chris, but is then interrupted by Susie. It is at that moment when Lancer comes to the rescue and overthrows his father in a daring coup, which I think is a good time to take a look at him. Lancer is a character that on the surface probably seems chaotic neutral in the beginning, but I don't really think so. Even at the beginning of the adventure, Lancer doesn't really seem to take too much interest in capturing the heroes. In fact, he seemed more interested in just getting their attention. Once he got that with Susie, his true character shined through. Lancer is actually a kind, sweet, but very weird little boy that always did things in order to help his friends. I'd say from the beginning, Lancer has always been chaotic good. Apparently, he does even less damage to Susie, his best friend, when fighting her. The heroes reflect on their almost loss, but Susie is the one to swoop in and comfort Ralsay. In fact, I think this is another good moment to talk about characters like Susie. Susie is the classic introverted bully. She has an implied very rough home life and is thus very little passions and reasons to be friendly with others. She eats chalk and has ratty clothes and is ashamed of her lot in life, most likely from being poor and hungry all the time. From the beginning, she was never an evil person either. She threatens Chris right away because of her embarrassment, but held back because she didn't want to make a person she respected upset. Once Susie made her first friend with Lancer and started goofing off and having fun with him, it's very clear that she is just a big old softie who is wise beyond her years because of the trauma she presumably faces at home. After making friends, she finally understands that that's all she ever wanted. Honestly, this is one of the best depictions of this type of young person that I've ever seen. Nat 20 character and chaotic good. The heroes say their goodbye to all their friends, unless the party of course chooses the slaughter path, to which they didn't have the opportunity to say goodbye, nor did anyone want to say goodbye with them. And that's really about it. Oh, Ralsay is actually revealed to be a white goat. I like this design considerably less. Anyway, the heroes say goodbye to their friends and head home. Chris and Susie leave the dark world and enter an empty classroom with toys strewn about that resemble the characters that they just finished interacting with. Susie questions if they experienced what was even real, but then decides to come back tomorrow as friends. Chris leaves school and gets chewed out by their mother, but after finding out that Chris made a friend, Toriel relents and simply waits for them to come home. Chris is then given the opportunity to run around town, and we can now check out the alignment of all the townspeople. Woo boy, here we go! The library is filled with 2 of Chris's classmates, including the snake crocodile person, who is only copying a picture of a soccer ball. There is also a creature called a Tem who is reading a hot demon manga instead of studying. There is a bird kid who seems to work at the library a part-time, this weird thing here, and an unseen dog working in the computer in the lab. I suspect the two students are chaotic neutral. The bird person is probably chaotic good. The thing is, and the dog has to be chaotic evil. There's a police officer named Undine blocking traffic. When Chris talks to her, they can bring up the Dark World and their teacher Alphys, for some reason. Otherwise, this officer seems to be incredibly bored and seems to actually be causing more harm than good. I'll just say chaotic neutral since the officer actually seems to be a bit of a troublemaker. In the hospital, Chris encounters a very kind, neutral good receptionist who asks to play piano for her? Chris tries to play the piano, but they just flubs the note. Either this is a joke or Chris is just having an off day. There's a horrifying patient who is either heavily sedated or needs a padded cell. Either way, I'm not going to align them. Chris then encounters a friendly reindeer classmate and her dad, who reveals some interesting information about Chris and their parents. And both of them seem to be a nice neutral or lawful good. The bear here seems to have a very high opinion of the mayor, who we don't see, but I'm guessing both of them are lawful good. Meanwhile, this dude in glasses is kind of a jerk, so chaotic evil, and the secretary seems chaotic neutral. The priest is a very kind and pleasant lawful good who explains that they are sad that Chris and their family don't come to church like they used to. He does have some sass, but that doesn't take away from anything. In RC's diner, there really isn't much to go off of in here. Most of these characters are either just nice people, sweet people, or they just tell one-off jokes, except for the receptionist who gives some nice backstory on Chris and their family. Just assume that they occupy the top left corner-ish of the alignment wheel. Same thing goes for the employees of Ice's Pizza. I can't determine their alignments except for this weirdo who wants to be an actor and is just as dumb as someone who thinks they can make their career on YouTube. Chaotic neutral. We do encounter this weird character named Sans or Sans. It's unclear how to pronounce that. All he does is crack weird Yo Mama jokes and mess with Chris. Also, there's some weird dialogue that doesn't make any sense. I think the creator of this game had a stroke or something when making this encounter. What's even happening here? Honestly, this character doesn't seem that important. I'll just label them as chaotic neutral and give it a Nat 1 scene. Chris runs into some classmates near the apartment building, and it's the same as all the other citizens. They're either rude or standoffish, but that could be anything. But if you want, you could call them anywhere from neutral to chaotic neutral. Professor Alphys is just standing in the alley, taking care of a bunch of stray animals and being just a weird lurker. She doesn't even reprimanding you for skipping class or not bringing her chalk. Honestly, she gives other teachers a bad name. Maybe in a different life, if she had more important responsibilities, I'd like her more, but honestly, I don't care for this character. Chaotic neutral, I guess. Chris then runs into some anthropomorphic neighbors who give some very spicy information about Chris's unseen brother, Azrael. They're all kind of wild and weird teens, and the neighbors just seem well-meaning enough. Chaotic good on all of them. Asgore is Chris's adoptive father and a giant sweetheart. He apparently did something wrong though and was kicked out of their home and now lives separated from Toriel. He invites you in for a sleepover and lets you raid his fridge whenever you want. Honestly, he just seems like a good guy, but I'd be curious to find out what he actually did to deserve such harsh treatment from Toriel. Either way, neutral good. There are two lumberjack-looking bros hanging out in a park who honestly, I don't get what they're doing here. Maybe they play an important role in the next game coming out, but who knows? Neutral on the both of them since these two men are hanging out together and it's no one's business what they may or may not be doing with their own lives. Chris heads home for the evening to meet with their mother Toriel. Toriel said that there is a pie that is cooling and ready for them to eat. She has a pleasant conversation about how they are the only ones left in the house. It's nice that they can share stuff like pies. Toriel has some sass, but she is very sweet, neutral good. Chris then heads to bed, closing this chapter on their journey. Thank you everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. Join us next time for... So, many of you have probably noticed that I actually skipped several characters, and it's pretty obvious that I've done so, minus the one in the beginning of this episode, but I was naturally only using that as a framing device for this two-parter. And that's because the last handful of characters I think are the ones that matter the most. I'll go ahead and talk about them now in a seemingly confusing order, but it should make sense by the time the video is over. From the last game, we have Chara. I even had Mumkey give this little funny self-aware speech, and it's funny because Mumkey ironically thought it was a little too mean, even as a villain parody speech, but I did assure him that this was a joke. Believe me, I wrote that little bit with full self-awareness, and I am in a good place. Thank you to everyone who had concern about it, but I am fine. It was just a joke. Chara is a fascinating character for me because they are the only actual human that we see as a character within Undertale. We'll talk about Frisk in a minute, but Chara is interesting because the only piece of backstory and lore we get from them is from their best friend Asriel at the end of the game, who states that they hated humanity. Chara came into the underground with an axe to grind. Notice how they never actually caused harm to monsters specifically. Instead, Chara was more interested in fighting humans rather than monsters. After possessing Asriel, they set out to kill more humans rather than monsters, and it's thanks to Asriel's actions that never happened. Asriel is a true hero because of this. Chara is chaotic evil, but those lines and little details of their backstory always stuck out in the back of my mind. Why does Chara hate humans specifically so much? Asriel talks about them as if they were a good friend, just not a good person. We might never know the details of their plan, or even if it is that important, since they eventually just end up destroying the world anyway. You could argue that they always intended to kill monsters too, especially if you've seen the post-genocide, post-pacifist run, and they actually do take out the rest, but this could sort of be an undead consequence since Chara and the player sort of share a soul at that point. Devil and Sham share a lot in common as they were both court jesters and magicians respectively. They were fine until they were introduced to someone who turned their worldview into something nihilistic and dismissive. They gained a twisted sense of humor about everything and how things are changing due to the weird new things happening in their lore. It's pretty commonly accepted by the fans that the person who introduced these concepts to them is Gaster, as evidenced by some Easter eggs presented in and out of universe. Either way, they are now basically chaotic neutral due to these wild shifts in morality and ethics. Gaster actually brings us to our next topic, the multiverse hopping individuals we talked about at the beginning of these videos, who gives us our connections from not only Undertale to Deltarune, but from the game to the players. Frisk and Chris are both pretty much non-entities within the Undertale universe, but simultaneously give us both our connections into both worlds. Frisk behaves as you command, as the player avatar, and so does Chris. Now, normally this wouldn't matter, but when Chris rips out his heart, this soul, it is then very clear that this is meant to be you as the player, and you are basically possessing these two characters in their universe, for better or worse. And finally, that leads us into the most important character of the Underrune verse, and I think everyone has figured it out by now. You. You are the most important character in these games, and frankly, I think that's the point Toby is trying to make, regardless of how different the themes and messages are in each game. Undertale is a game where all of your choices matter, from stuff that you don't think means anything up until the very end where you stare down some of the biggest challenges that the game can throw at you. That little heart? That's not Frisk's soul. The choice to show mercy or fight, that's not Frisk. That's you, and it's up to you entirely to see how you treat the denizens of this world. Denizens that clearly do not exist. Undertale is very, very aware that they are in fact a game and a series of code that exists because of one guy's imagination and hard work. What you do matters immensely to the game, and your decisions can leave the story as one of the most joyous and hopeful endings of all time, or a complete and desolate wasteland. Which ironically leads into Deltarune, a game that prides itself on having a message that nothing you choose matters. After all, it is a game. Whether you choose to use violence or mercy, the game will still go on, and nothing you can do will really change anything. All lore aside, you are simultaneously the master and passive observer of their narrative. However, it's clear from this ending that the game, or rather the characters, aren't necessarily even welcoming to you. Even though, again, they do not exist and they do not matter. You as a human being are all that you have and all that you know. It's almost a meme, but there is a very strong possibility at this point that you may not exist yourself. The world, mathematically speaking, might actually be a simulation or a game, and we may not even be real. The only assurance that we have that we exist are in fact our first-person experiences. When you look down and look at your hands, you can, with your eyes, see that you can make impulses and move your body, and when you grab something, you have sensations that communicate that what you are experiencing is real. But what about when you run into someone else? How do you know that when you interact with them that they are in fact another sentient creature that gets experience the same sensations. You really don't. The only confirmation that you can ever get that people exist is the faith that you believe that they are real. You exist within your own experiences and give everyone else in the world the benefit of the doubt that they are real as well. If you are removed from this story, if you die or give up, that's it. That's all you will ever experience, which means, as far as you know, the story is over. That's it. It's done. Your impact of the world could be great if you have the drive, luck, or ambition to pursue it. You could matter more than anyone else. Simultaneously, you are but a small piece of the world at large, and if everyone is a part of a simulation, then nothing matters. We simultaneously matter and don't matter at the same time, and that's the interesting philosophical irony of looking at something as meta as Undertale. Now, am I looking at this way too deep? Totally. Totally, I'm looking at this way too deep. But that's the fun of this discussion, isn't it? And that's what's fascinating when it comes to an artistic expression that can only be done in an interactive medium like these two games. So bringing this back around, what alignment is anyone? Doesn't really matter, does it? You can't control their actions. The only question that really matters here is what alignment are you? Because as a wise skeleton once said, maybe the difference between a bad time and saving the world is some good food, some bad laughs, and some nice friends.